"You can't cross this bridge anymore. You don't belong here." Those 9 words would destroy her entire empire. The HOA president blocked my way to work, smiling like she'd won. 47 millionaires watched as she turned me away from the only bridge into Willow Creek Estates. She made one fatal mistake: never checking who actually owned that bridge. Where are you watching this unfold from? Comment below. Because in 24 hours, those same millionaires would be lined up at my door, cash in hand, begging for permission to leave their own neighborhood. All it took was one dusty document to flip their world upside down. This is what happens when rich bullies forget to do their homework. My name is David Thompson, and until 3 days ago, I was just a history teacher trying to get to work. Every morning for 5 years, I'd driven my beat-up Honda Civic across Sterling Bridge to reach Preston Academy, the private school nestled inside Willow Creek Estates. The commute saved me 40 minutes compared to the highway route, and when you're paid $48,000 a year, every gallon of gas counts. But that Monday morning at 6:30, everything changed. A metal barrier blocked the bridge entrance, complete with a shiny new sign that read, "Pillow Bridge Bridge, Willow Creek Residents Only." My first thought was that there must be some mistake. My second thought died when Monica Crawford stepped out of her white Range Rover like a queen surveying her kingdom. "Oh, Mr. Thompson, isn't it?" she said, her voice dripping with the kind of fake sweetness that made my skin crawl. "I'm afraid there's been a change in policy. From today forward, only residents of Willow Creek Estates may use Sterling Bridge." She stood there in her designer workout clothes that probably cost more than my monthly rent, flanked by 2 security guards who looked like they bench-pressed small cars for fun. "But I teach at Preston Academy," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've been using this bridge for 5 years. Monica's smile widened, and I noticed how it never reached her eyes. "Yes, well, perhaps it's time you found employment somewhere more appropriate? Unless you'd like to buy a home here, the cheapest one is only $2.5 million. The security guards chuckled, and I felt heat rise to my face. What Monica didn't know was that 10 years ago her ex-husband had left her for a kindergarten teacher, half her age. Everyone in town knew the story, how she'd gone from suburban housewife to corporate shark overnight, climbing the ladder at a Fortune 500 company before retiring early to rule over Willow Creek with an iron fist. And now, apparently, her hatred of teachers had found a new target. "This is a public bridge," I tried to argue. "You can't just—" But Monica cut me off with a wave of her manicured hand. "Actually, it's not. The HOA purchased the bridge rights last month, 47-0 vote. Sorry you weren't invited to weigh in, but as I said, residents only." She turned back to her car, then paused. "Oh, and Mr. Thompson? If I see you trying to use this bridge again, I'll have you arrested for trespassing. Have a nice day." I sat in my car for a full minute after she drove away, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. 180 students were waiting for me to teach them about power and corruption in American history. The irony wasn't lost on me. By the time I took the highway route and arrived at school, I was 45 minutes late. Principal Johnson gave me a warning, and I spent the entire day feeling like a scolded child. But that evening, something my grandfather used to say echoed in my mind. "This bridge will protect you someday." It was such an odd thing to say about a bridge, and I'd never really understood what he meant. Grandpa had passed away 2 years ago, leaving me a few $1,000s and some boxes of old documents I'd been too busy to sort through. That night, I finally opened those boxes. Most of it was exactly what you'd expect from a 90-year-old pack rat. Yellowed newspapers, faded photographs, receipts for things that no longer existed. But at the bottom of the second box, wrapped in plastic and tied with string, was a manila envelope marked Sterling Bridge. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a deed dated 1924, officially registering ownership of Sterling Bridge to the Thompson family. But that wasn't all. There was a second document from 2019 signed by my grandfather and properly filed with the county, confirming the ownership transfer to me. A sticky note in my grandfather's shaky handwriting was attached to the front. "David, my boy, if anyone ever tries to stop you from crossing this bridge, remember, you own it. It's time to teach them a real history lesson." I stared at the papers until my eyes burned. I owned Sterling Bridge. I owned the only way into Willow Creek Estates. Monica Crawford had just picked a fight with the wrong history teacher. The irony was so perfect I actually laughed out loud, alone in my small apartment, surrounded by the dusty remnants of my grandfather's life. Tomorrow was going to be very interesting indeed. 29 days until school starts. And Monica Crawford was about to learn that sometimes the best lessons come from the most unexpected teachers. The next morning at 7 sharp, I sat in the office of Morrison and Associates, watching as the elderly lawyer's eyes widened behind his thick glasses. "David, finally! Your grandfather told me that if you ever had trouble with the bridge, I should expect your call." He pulled out a thick folder from his filing cabinet, dust motes dancing in the morning sunlight streaming through his window. He was quite specific about keeping all the documentation current. Smart man, your grandfather. Morrison spread the papers across his desk like he was dealing cards in a high-stakes poker game. "This is completely legitimate. You own Sterling Bridge 100%. We refiled everything with the county in 2019 to make sure it was ironclad. No one can challenge this." "But why didn't he ever tell me?" I asked, still trying to wrap my head around the fact that I'd been driving across my own property for 5 years without knowing it. Morrison leaned back in his leather chair with a knowing smile. "Your grandfather believed that real power isn't about showing off. It's about knowing exactly when to use it. He said you'd know when the time was right." He paused, then added with a chuckle, "He also said that someday someone would try to use that bridge to bully others, and when they did, you'd teach them a lesson they'd never forget." I thought about Monica's smug face, her security guards, the way she'd dismissed me like I was nothing. "I think that day has come," I said. Morrison grinned. "Then let's go have some fun." An hour later, I walked into the Willow Creek HOA office like I owned the place, which technically I partially did. The entire board was in session, Monica standing at the head of the conference table like a general addressing her troops. The room smelled of expensive coffee and even more expensive perfume. "I need to speak with you about Sterling Bridge," I announced. Monica's face went from annoyed to amused in half a second. "Mr. Thompson, this meeting is for residents only. Security can show you out." But I was already placing the deed on the table, right in the middle of her perfectly organized agenda. The room fell silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the Italian marble floor. Monica's face drained of color as she read the document. Her hands actually shook. This can't be real. Jason, look at this immediately." Jason Crawford, her 28-year-old son and apparently the HOA's legal counsel, pushed his wire-rimmed glasses up his nose and studied the papers. I watched as his expression shifted from skeptical to shocked. "Mom," he said slowly, "this is legitimate. County seal, proper filing dates, everything. Mr. Thompson owns Sterling Bridge." Monica slammed her hand on the table. "Shut up, Jason. Find a way to challenge it. This is impossible." Sophia Rodriguez, the HOA treasurer, leaned over to whisper to another board member, but her voice carried. "Why is she panicking like this? It's just a bridge." The room erupted into chaos. Board members were pulling out their phones, frantically Googling property laws and texting their personal attorneys. Monica paced back and forth like a caged animal, her designer heels clicking a frantic rhythm on the marble floor. "This has to be a forgery," she kept muttering. "It has to be." But deep down, everyone in that room knew the truth. The papers were real, and Monica's carefully constructed kingdom was built on a foundation she didn't actually own. I stood there calmly, letting the panic wash over them like a tide. This was better than any lesson I could teach in a classroom. This was history happening in real time, and they were all failing the test. What they didn't know was that Emma Rodriguez, Sophia's 17-year-old daughter, was sitting in the corner supposedly taking meeting minutes for her summer internship. But I could see her phone propped against her notebook recording everything. The younger generation always finds a way. Monica was already on her phone, practically screaming at someone to get her legal team there immediately. Within 20 minutes, 3 lawyers in $1,000 suits had materialized like corporate vampires smelling blood. They huddled over the documents while Monica paced back and forth, her heels clicking on the floor like a countdown to disaster. Finally, the lead lawyer straightened up. "Mrs. Crawford, these documents are authentic. Mr. Thompson has full ownership rights to Sterling Bridge. He can charge tolls, restrict access, or close it entirely for maintenance at his discretion." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Monica stood frozen, her face a mask of barely controlled rage. "Fine," she said through gritted teeth. "You can use the bridge to get to work. Happy now?" I smiled, the kind of smile I usually reserved for students who thought they were too smart for their own good. "Thank you. Oh, and one more thing. Starting tomorrow, I'll be exercising my ownership rights. The toll for crossing Sterling Bridge will be $50 per vehicle, per trip, cash or digital payment accepted, no resident discounts." Jason dropped his pen. Sophia's mouth fell open. Emma zoomed her camera in on Monica's face, which was turning an impressive shade of purple. "You can't do this," Monica screamed. "That's extortion. That's illegal. That's capitalism," I interrupted calmly. "You taught me well about private property rights. See you at 6 a.m. tomorrow, Mrs. Crawford. Don't forget to bring exact change." I turned and walked out, leaving chaos in my wake. Behind me, I could hear Monica shouting at her lawyers to find any loophole, any way to stop me. But we both knew the truth. She had started this war. And now, she was about to learn what happened when you cornered a history teacher who knew his rights. 28 days until school starts, and class was definitely in session. 5:45 in the morning, and I was setting up a folding table and an automated barrier gate at Sterling Bridge. Stanley, the old security guard from Preston Academy, who'd always been kind to me, volunteered to help. "You sure about this, David?" he asked, testing the barrier arm. "Once you start this, there's no going back." I looked at the bridge that had apparently been my inheritance all along, its old steel beams glowing in the pre-dawn light. "They started it, Stanley. I'm just teaching them about supply and demand. Economics meets karma." He chuckled and shook his head. "Well, I've been waiting 20 years to see someone put Monica Crawford in her place. Glad it's you doing it." Stanley helped me set up a professional-looking toll booth setup, complete with a cash register, credit card reader, and a large sign that read, "Sterling Bridge Toll. $50 per vehicle per trip, exact change appreciated." We even had a security camera recording everything, because if teaching had taught me anything, it was to always document everything. "You know," Stanley said as he adjusted the camera angle, "I remember when Monica first moved here. She was different then, quieter. The divorce changed her, made her mean, but that's no excuse for what she's become." I nodded, checking that the barrier arm was working smoothly. Everyone had a story, but not everyone chose to weaponize their pain against others. At 6 o'clock sharp, the first car approached, a Mercedes S-Class belonging to Dr. Harrison, the cosmetic dentist who'd built his fortune on the insecurities of wealthy housewives. His window rolled down, and his face went from confused to outraged in record time. "What the hell is this?" he demanded. I pushed my glasses up my nose in what Emma would later call my signature teacher move, and smiled pleasantly. "Good morning, Dr. Harrison. That'll be $50, please." "I accept cash, credit, or digital payment." His face turned red. "This is insane. You can't charge me to leave my own neighborhood." I held up the laminated toll sign I had had made at the 24-hour print shop. "Actually, I can. Sterling Bridge is private property, and as the owner, I have the right to charge tolls. You're welcome to use the highway instead. It only adds 45 minutes to your commute." Within 30 minutes, there were 40 cars lined up, honking their horns in a symphony of entitled rage. Emma Rodriguez was live streaming the whole thing from the side of the road. "Yo, check this out," she said to her phone. "Remember yesterday when my mom's boss tried to ban our history teacher? Well, plot twist, he owns the bridge. Now he's charging everyone $50 to cross. This is literally history in the making." Her stream exploded. Within 2 hours, the video had 5 million views and climbing. Comments poured in faster than the cars at my toll booth. "King behavior? This man really pulled an Uno reverse card in real life. The way that lady in the Range Rover is turning purple, though." That lady, of course, was Monica. The morning sun climbed higher and the line of luxury cars grew longer. Some residents tried to negotiate. "I'll give you 20, offered one woman in a BMW. "The price is 50, I replied calmly. "But I live here," she protested. "So did I until yesterday, when your HOA president banned me from doing my job," I countered. "Would you like to pay by cash or card?" She threw 2 20s and a 10 at me and screeched through the gate. Others tried threats. "I'll sue you," shouted a man in a Tesla. "Get in line," I replied. "Monica's lawyers are already working on it. That'll be $50, please." The beauty of it all was that they had no choice. The highway route added so much time to their commute that paying the toll was still the better option. Supply and demand, just like I taught in my economics unit. She arrived with a police escort and what looked like half a law firm. "This is extortion," she screamed before she even got out of her car. "Arrest him! He's holding us hostage." Officer Daniels, who I remembered from when he'd spoken to my students about law enforcement, examined my ownership documents and toll permit. "Ma'am, this is private property. He's completely within his legal rights. If you don't want to pay the toll, you're free to use alternate routes." Monica's face contorted with rage. "I'll build a new bridge. I'll destroy you. You'll what?" I asked calmly. "Spend $15 million on construction? Where will you put it? I own the land on both sides of the river at this crossing point. That was a bluff. I only owned the bridge itself, but Monica didn't know that. The crowd of residents had grown, and not all of them were on Monica's side. Dr. Williams, an elderly pediatrician who'd always been reasonable, spoke up. Honestly, Monica, you brought this on yourself. I voted against blocking him from the bridge. It was petty and unnecessary. Mr. Patel, who'd made his fortune in tech, added, I don't mind paying $50, but blocking teachers from getting to work? That's messed up. My kids go to Preston Academy. What were you thinking? Sofia Rodriguez stepped forward, looking uncomfortable but determined. I motioned to reverse the decision about bridge access. This is embarrassing for our entire community. Monica spun around like a cornered animal. You're all cowards? Fine. We'll have an emergency meeting tonight. That evening's HOA meeting was standing room only. Monica stood at the podium, her voice shaking with barely controlled fury. Since you all lack vision, let me make this simple. We are going to build a new bridge. The cost is estimated at $15 million. To fund this, HOA fees will increase by 500%, effective immediately. The room erupted. Are you insane? Someone shouted. 500%? I won't pay that! This is all because you wanted to play queen, another voice called out. Jason Crawford stood up slowly, his face pale but determined. Mom, this is insane. All this because you have some vendetta against a teacher who never did anything to... You're my lawyer, or are you still a schoolboy? Monica hissed. Do your job. Your job. The entire room was silent. Emma had caught it all on camera, of course. Jason straightened his tie, picked up his briefcase, and walked out without another word. Monica tried to continue the meeting, but the damage was done. People were already leaving, whispering among themselves. The kingdom was starting to crumble, and the queen didn't even realize it yet. 25 days until school starts, and the revolution had officially begun. As I drove home that night, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mr. Thompson, we need to talk. Jason Crawford. The game was about to change again. By day 10 of the toll booth operation, my email inbox looked like a Black Friday sale had exploded inside it. 32 messages from Willow Creek residents, and they all had the same theme: desperation. Mr. Thompson, my daughter is in your AP history class. Can we work out a deal? The 500% increase is insane. I'll pay you $100,000 a year for unlimited bridge access. Monica has lost her mind. Please help us stop her. I read each email carefully, starting to see a pattern. Monica's iron grip on Willow Creek was finally causing blisters, and people were ready to let go. The woman who'd ruled through fear and intimidation for 5 years was about to learn that fear was a terrible foundation for an empire. What surprised me most were the personal stories hidden in those emails. Dr. Williams wrote about how Monica had forced him to vote for measures he disagreed with by threatening to have him removed from the community clinic board. A retired teacher named Miss Peterson revealed that Monica had blocked her from tutoring neighborhood kids because it lowered property values to have strangers coming and going. Even the wealthy weren't immune. Monica had apparently blackmailed several residents with information she'd gathered through her corporate connections. The pattern was clear. Monica Crawford had built her power not through leadership, but through systematic intimidation. And now, with the bridge fiasco exposing her true nature, the dam was finally breaking. Sofia Rodriguez organized a secret meeting at her house, and I was invited as the guest of honor. 25 of the 47 families showed up, which was more than I'd expected. The living room smelled like coffee and rebellion. Monica is destroying our community, Sofia began, her accounting background showing as she pulled up spreadsheets on her laptop. Last month, she transferred $500,000 to something called a feasibility study for the new bridge. But I can't find any company by that name. There are no receipts, no documentation, nothing. An accountant named Jim Bradley leaned forward. That's embezzlement. Plain and simple. I've seen this before in corporate audits. The room buzzed with angry whispers. Then the door opened and everyone fell silent. Jason Crawford walked in, his face still showing a faint bruise from his mother's slap. I know I'm probably the last person you want to see, he said quietly, but I need to help. My mother, she's not just trying to maintain control, she's planning something much worse. He set a box of documents on the coffee table. For the past 5 years, I've been documenting everything. Every illegal transaction, every forged signature, every backroom deal. I knew this day would come. Sofia gasped. Jason, why didn't you say anything before? He laughed bitterly. Would you stand up to Monica Crawford without backup? She's been controlling me my whole life. But when she hit me in front of everyone, his voice trailed off. That was the last straw. Jason pulled out a folder marked with a red dragon logo. Dragon Realty Corporation, They're offering $200 million for all of Willow Creek Estates. But there's a catch. Monica has to deliver 100% of the infrastructure, including, he looked at me, including Sterling Bridge. That's why she was so panicked when you showed up with the deed. You're the only thing standing between her and the biggest payday of her life. The room exploded. She's trying to sell our homes? We'll be forced out. This is our community. I held up my hand for silence. Here's what I propose. We form a new HOA, completely democratic, completely transparent. I'll charge $1 per year for bridge access to all members. Monica and anyone who supports her, $200 per trip. Emma Rodriguez, who'd been quietly typing on her laptop in the corner, spoke up. I can build a website for the new HOA in 20 minutes. We'll call it New Willow Creek and start a petition. Her mother smiled proudly. That's my girl. Within 3 hours, the petition had 2,000 signatures, including many from outside the community who'd been following the drama online. The rebellion was going viral, and Monica was about to face something she'd never encountered before. Democracy in action. The vote was scheduled for the next evening. 35 families voted for the new HOA. Only 12 remained loyal to Monica. She'd lost her majority, and with it, her power. That night, Jason shared more details about his mother's plan. She promised Dragon Realty she'd have everyone out within 6 months. They're planning to demolish everything and build high-rise luxury condos. She gets $20 million personally, plus a penthouse in the new development. He showed us emails, contracts, even recorded phone conversations. She's been planning this for 2 years. The bridge thing just accelerated her timeline. The room was silent as we processed this betrayal. Monica wasn't just a bad HOA president. She was actively working to destroy the community she'd sworn to protect. That night at 11, my phone rang. Monica's voice was like ice. You think you're clever, don't you? Well, enjoy your victory while it lasts. I've hired an inspector to examine your precious bridge. He'll find problems, I guarantee it. Structural issues that will require immediate closure, 6 months minimum. How do you like that? I stayed calm. Monica, you're digging your own grave. Every move you make just proves why you shouldn't be in charge. She laughed, but it sounded more like a snarl. We'll see about that. Sweet dreams, Mr. Thompson. Tomorrow, your bridge comes down. But I wasn't worried. I'd been teaching long enough to know that bullies always made the same mistake. They assumed everyone else played as dirty as they did. They never expected someone to simply stand up and say no. As I hung up the phone, I heard something outside. Footsteps on the gravel of my driveway. Then, my security camera app buzzed, motion detected at my car. I called 911 immediately, then watched through the window as a figure in black ran away from my Honda. 20 minutes later, Officer Martinez was shining his flashlight under my car. Mr. Thompson, he said grimly, someone cut your brake lines. If you'd driven this morning, he didn't need to finish. We both knew what would have happened. Any idea who would do this? He asked. I thought about Monica's threat, about the lengths she'd go to protect her scheme. I have a pretty good idea, I said. And I think it's time to call in some bigger guns. The war for Willow Creek Estates had just escalated from financial to physical, and Monica Crawford had no idea what she'd just unleashed. 20 days until school starts, and someone had just tried to murder a teacher. That was definitely going to affect their grade. The fake inspector showed up at 7 the next morning, and I knew he was fake because he was still using his phone to find the bridge. Inspector Bob Miller looked like he'd bought his uniform at a costume shop and his clipboard at the dollar store. This bridge has dangerous structural cracks, he announced loudly, making sure the gathering crowd could hear. It needs to be closed immediately for 6 months of repairs. He paused dramatically, then leaned in closer. Unless, of course, we can work out an arrangement. $50,000 would help me expedite the inspection process, if you know what I mean. I smiled and kept my phone recording in my pocket. That's very interesting, Mr. Miller. Tell me, which agency do you work for again? He stammered something about the State Bridge Safety Commission, which I was pretty sure didn't exist. And who hired you to inspect my bridge? I pressed. I mean, who's paying for this urgent safety check? Miller was sweating now, despite the cool morning air. Listen, buddy, the lady paid me 10 grand to say the bridge is unsafe. We split this 50,000 and everyone wins, right? I had everything I needed. Wrong, I said. Everyone loses when corruption wins. Thanks for the confession. But I didn't even need to use the recording. The next morning, the FBI walked into the HOA meeting like they owned the place. Agent Rivera, a woman who looked like she could stare down a hurricane, addressed the stunned room. We've been investigating Monica Crawford for 6 months. Thank you to Mr. Thompson and Ms. Rodriguez for providing additional evidence through the proper channels. Emma grinned from her corner, proud that her live streams and website tips had actually made a difference. The scope of Monica's crimes was staggering. Agent Rivera laid it out methodically, each revelation landing like a hammer blow. Monica had created a web of shell companies to hide HOA funds. Not just the $800,000 we knew about, but over $2 million systematically stolen over 5 years. She'd bribed city officials to approve zoning changes that would make the Dragon Realty deal possible. She'd forged signatures on official documents, including several residents' proxies for HOA votes. She'd even tried to have the local historical society declare Sterling Bridge unsafe so she could force its demolition. But the most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. The 3 security guards Monica employed had been recording their conversations for months, tired of being asked to do increasingly illegal things. They'd turned whistleblower 2 weeks ago, giving the FBI the final pieces they needed. The FBI had everything. Monica had transferred $800,000 from HOA funds to offshore accounts. She'd bribed 3 city officials to approve zoning changes. She'd created fake companies to funnel money for the Dragon Realty deal. She'd hired Bob Miller, who was already in custody and singing like a canary trying out for American Idol. The evidence was overwhelming, but the real bombshell came when Jason Crawford called a press conference on the HOA lawn. 50 reporters showed up, their cameras hungry for the scandal that had been trending online for days. Jason stood at a makeshift podium, his face calm but determined. "I'm Jason Crawford, and everything you've heard about my mother is true. But it's worse than you know." He held up a USB drive and a banker's box full of documents. "For 5 years, I've documented every crime, every lie, every person she's hurt. I thought I was protecting her, but I was really enabling her. When she slapped me for questioning her, that was the final straw. Not the first time she's hit me, but definitely the last." He detailed years of financial fraud, intimidation tactics, and forged documents. Monica watched from her living room window, and we could see her throw a wine glass at her television when Jason announced he was cooperating fully with federal authorities. The news spread faster than wildfire in August. Local HOA president arrested in $1 million fraud scheme. Teacher exposes corruption with bridge toll protest. Son testifies against mother in shocking betrayal. The headlines wrote themselves. Jason's testimony was devastating in its thoroughness. He revealed how Monica had started small, skimming a few thousand here and there for administrative costs, but power and greed had consumed her. She'd graduated to elaborate schemes, fake vendors, and phantom services. The swimming pool renovation that cost $300,000, the contractor was her cousin, and the actual cost was $50,000. The landscaping contract for $100,000 a year? The company was owned by Monica through a shell corporation, and the actual workers were paid minimum wage. Every aspect of Willow Creek's finances had been corrupted, turned into Monica's personal piggy bank. "She used to tell me that stupid people deserve to be separated from their money," Jason said, his voice heavy with regret. "She said the residents were sheep, and she was the wolf. I'm ashamed I didn't stop her sooner." On day 15 of my bridge ownership adventure, at 6 a.m, the FBI tactical team arrived at Monica's mansion. 20 cameras were waiting to capture the moment Monica Crawford, still in her silk pajamas and no makeup, was let out in handcuffs. "David Thompson," she screamed as they put her in the car. "You'll pay for this. I know what your grandfather did. Check your mailbox." The agents shoved her into the vehicle before she could say more, but her words sent a chill down my spine. What did she mean about my grandfather? I raced home and found a manila envelope in my mailbox. Inside was a single photograph. My grandfather as a young man, standing next to an even younger Monica Crawford. On the back, in Monica's handwriting, "He destroyed my family first. The Crawfords owned Sterling Bridge until your grandfather stole it from my father in 1965. This was always about revenge?" I stared at the photo, trying to process this new information. My grandfather had taken the bridge from Monica's family? Was I the villain in someone else's story? Emma found me sitting on my porch, still holding the photo. "Mr. Thompson, you okay?" I showed her the picture. She studied it, then shrugged. "So what? Even if your grandfather did something wrong 60 years ago, that doesn't make what Monica did right. You used the bridge to help people. She used her power to hurt them. That's the difference. Sometimes teenagers see things more clearly than adults." Emma was right. Whatever had happened in the past, Monica had chosen to become a tyrant. I'd chosen a different path. That evening, I got a call from Morrison, my grandfather's lawyer. "David, you need to come to my office. There's something else your grandfather left for you, something I was instructed not to reveal unless Monica Crawford specifically mentioned the past." My stomach dropped. What other secrets had my grandfather been hiding? 15 days until school starts, and suddenly I wasn't sure if I was the hero or the villain of this story. But I knew one thing for certain. The truth about Sterling Bridge was about to come out, and it was going to change everything. Monica's call from jail came at exactly midnight, because of course it did. Even behind bars, she had a flair for the dramatic. "Thompson?" Her voice crackled through the prison phone. "Go look under the bridge. Your grandfather left something there, something that shows who he really was. You think you're the hero? You're just the grandson of a thief." I should have ignored her, but curiosity won. The next morning, I met Officer Martinez at Sterling Bridge with a metal detector and a shovel. Under the south support beam, we found an old safety deposit box wrapped in waterproof plastic. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were documents that made my stomach turn. My grandfather hadn't just been a businessman 40 years ago. He'd been a developer, and not a kind one. The papers showed how he'd forced dozens of families to sell their land for pennies on the dollar. He'd used the same tactics Monica had tried: intimidation, legal manipulation, financial pressure. He'd built his fortune on the misery of others. The Crawford family had owned Sterling Bridge since the 1800s, and my grandfather had taken it through a legal loophole when Monica's father missed a single tax payment during a family crisis. There was a letter in my grandfather's handwriting. "David, if you're reading this, then the Crawfords have finally come for revenge. I'm not proud of what I did. I destroyed lives to build wealth, and I've regretted it every day since. I left you this bridge not as a gift, but as a chance to do what I couldn't. Use power to help, not hurt. Make it right, son. Be better than I was." The documents painted a picture of a man I'd never known existed. My grandfather had arrived in Willow Creek in 1962 with big dreams and flexible morals. He'd identified struggling families, offered them loans they couldn't repay, then foreclosed on their properties. The Crawford family had been his biggest target. They owned not just the bridge, but hundreds of acres of prime real estate. When Harold Crawford's wife got cancer, the medical bills mounted. My grandfather struck when they were most vulnerable, using a technicality about property tax payments to seize the bridge. It was legal, but it was cruel. The Crawfords lost everything, and Harold never recovered. He died bitter and broken, passing his hatred down to his daughter Monica like a poisoned inheritance. I sat on the riverbank, feeling like the ground had shifted beneath me. Everything I thought I knew was wrong. Sofia Rodriguez found me there an hour later, still staring at the papers. "David, the whole community is worried about you. Emma said you looked like you'd seen a ghost." I showed her everything. She read in silence, then sat beside me. "You know what the difference is between you and Monica?" she asked. "Monica knew this history and chose to repeat it. You didn't know, and when you found out, you're horrified. That's what makes you different. That's what makes you good." Lisa Park and several other residents had followed Sophia. Soon half the neighborhood was there, reading the documents, processing the truth. "So what now?" someone asked. "Do we hate David because his grandfather was a jerk?" Emma spoke up from the back of the crowd. "Are you all serious right now? Mr. Thompson has spent the last 2 weeks fighting for us. He stood up to Monica when no one else would. He's charging us $1 a year for bridge access when he could charge thousands. Actions matter more than ancestry." But there was more to discover. Morrison had given me a second box, one that my grandfather had added to just months before his death. Inside were receipts, canceled checks, and letters, evidence of 20 years of quiet redemption. My grandfather had anonymously paid for college scholarships for the children of families he'd displaced. He'd donated millions to local charities. He'd even tried to give the bridge back to the Crawfords in 1995, but Harold had refused, too proud and bitter to accept what he saw as charity from his destroyer. The final document was a trust fund establishment paper dated 2018, just a year before my grandfather died. He'd set aside $50 million with specific instructions. The money could only be accessed if Sterling Bridge was used for community benefit, not personal gain. Old Stanley, who'd helped me set up the toll booth, cleared his throat. "I knew your grandfather, David. He was a hard man who did bad things. But in his last 20 years, he changed. He donated millions to charity, anonymously. He helped families he'd once hurt. He couldn't undo the past, but he tried to balance the scales. Maybe that's why he made sure you'd inherit the bridge. He knew someday a Crawford would come for revenge, and he wanted a good man standing in the way. That evening, Jason Crawford visited his mother in jail. I know because he called me right after. Mr. Thompson, there's something you need to know. Mom didn't tell you everything. Your grandfather left more than just the bridge. There's a trust fund, $50 million, but it has a condition. It can only be accessed if the bridge is used for community good, not personal gain. You qualified the moment you chose to protect us instead of exploiting us. I nearly dropped the phone. $50 million? Jason, I don't want it. I don't want anything that came from hurting people. But Jason laughed. Actually laughed. Don't you get it? This is your chance to fix things. Think what you could do with that money. Affordable housing for teachers and workers. Scholarships for kids who can't afford Preston Academy. You could undo the damage and create something beautiful. The next morning, Morrison confirmed everything. The trust existed, with ironclad conditions about its use. My grandfather had planned for this moment, knowing that someday his sins would surface and hoping his heir would choose redemption over revenge. I made my decision quickly. $30 million would go to building affordable housing in Willow Creek. $10 million would create the Thompson Education Trust for teacher scholarships and student aid. $10 million would rebuild Sterling Bridge and improve local infrastructure. I would keep nothing for myself. Your grandfather would be proud, Morrison said, wiping his eyes. He spent 20 years trying to atone for his mistakes. Now you can finish what he started. But there was one more surprise waiting. As I signed the papers distributing the trust fund, Morrison handed me one final document. Oh, and David, there's a small detail about the trust. If you give away all the money for community good, ownership of Sterling Bridge transfers to, let me see, the Crawford family heirs. That would be Jason Crawford now. I stared at the paper. After everything I'd fought for, I was about to lose the bridge? Emma, who'd been documenting everything, gasped. But that means Jason owns it now. He could charge whatever he wants. We all turned to look at Jason, who seemed as shocked as everyone else. The son of my enemy now held all the power. Everything we'd worked for could be undone with his signature. 10 days until school starts, and the biggest plot twist of all had just dropped. The question was, had Jason Crawford learned from his mother's mistakes, or was history about to repeat itself again? 6 months later, Willow Creek Estates had transformed so completely that visitors often asked if they were in the right place. The guard booth at Sterling Bridge was gone, replaced by a simple welcome sign. Sterling Bridge, where everyone is welcome. Toll, $1 per year. Honor system. Jason Crawford had made his choice the day he inherited the bridge, and it was the opposite of what his mother would have done. This bridge has seen enough division, he'd announced at the ceremony. It's time it brought people together instead. The new Willow Creek HOA operated with complete transparency, with Sofia Rodriguez as president and every meeting live-streamed by Emma's media team. Yes, Emma had turned her documentation habit into a full media company, with 3 employees and a mission to expose HOA corruption nationwide. Monica Crawford watched all of this from her federal prison cell, where she was serving 8 years for embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. At first she'd raged against everyone and everything, but isolation has a way of forcing reflection, and after 6 months something had shifted. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, addressed in Monica's surprisingly elegant handwriting. I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won again. Dear Mr. Thompson, it began, I hated you because you represented everything I'd lost. When Robert left me for that kindergarten teacher, he said she had something I didn't, a heart that cared about others more than status. I thought teachers were weak, pathetic, worthy only of contempt. You proved me wrong in every possible way. The letter continued for 3 pages, detailing her childhood as Harold Crawford's daughter, watching him lose the bridge to my grandfather, growing up with bitterness as her inheritance. We were both shaped by our grandfather's war, she wrote, but you chose to break the cycle. I chose to perpetuate it. That's the difference between us, and it's why you won. The most shocking part came at the end. I've been taking education courses here. When I get out, if you'll have me, I'd like to apply for that teaching assistant position at Preston Academy. I have a lot to learn about having a heart. I sat with that letter for a long time before making my decision. The dedication ceremony for the new Sterling Bridge took place on a perfect spring day. The old steel structure had been reinforced and beautified, with walking paths and gardens on both sides. A small museum documented the bridge's history, all of it, including the ugly parts. Thousands of people attended, from Willow Creek residents to teachers from across the state who'd been following our story. I stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd, and felt the weight of the moment. Bridges are metaphors we can touch, I began. They connect separated places, but more importantly, they connect separated people. This bridge has a complicated history. It's been a symbol of power, a tool of division, a weapon of revenge. But today, we reclaim it as what it should have always been, a pathway to community. I talked about my grandfather's mistakes and Monica's revenge. I talked about choosing forgiveness over bitterness, community over control. Everyone deserves a second chance, I concluded, even those who've hurt us, especially those who've hurt us, because that's how cycles break. That's how history stops repeating. The crowd erupted in applause. Emma, now a freshman at Harvard studying journalism and social justice, was filming everything. Her admissions essay about our bridge war had won her a full scholarship. "This is Emma Rodriguez reporting for New Willow Creek Media," she said to her camera. "The bridge that once divided us now unites us. And if it can happen here, it can happen in your community too. Keep fighting the good fight, everyone." Jason Crawford had opened his own law firm, Crawford Justice, offering free legal services to victims of HOA corruption. In 6 months, he'd helped dozens of families fight back against tyrannical boards. "Turns out I'm pretty good at this," he told me during the ceremony. "All those years of watching my mother's tactics taught me exactly how to counter them." Maybe everything happens for a reason. Old Stanley had retired from Preston Academy, but volunteered at the Bridge Museum, telling visitors the real story of the summer. A history teacher took on an HOA and won. "Best show I've seen in 70 years, he'd always conclude. "Better than any movie because it was real." The Thompson Education Trust had already provided scholarships to 50 teachers pursuing advanced degrees and hundreds of students attending Preston Academy who couldn't otherwise afford it. The affordable housing complex was under construction, with priority given to teachers, firefighters, nurses, and other essential workers who kept our community running. As the ceremony ended and people began exploring the new bridge facilities, I noticed someone standing alone at the far end. It was Mr. Harrison, the dentist who'd been in that first car I'd charged toll to. He'd been one of Monica's strongest supporters and had never quite forgiven me for the upheaval. "You destroyed everything," he said when I approached. "The property values, the exclusivity, the whole point of living here." I looked at the diverse crowd enjoying the bridge. Children playing in the new park, families taking photos. "No, Mr. Harrison, I destroyed the walls. Everything else, we built together." He turned and walked away, but I wasn't bothered. Not everyone would understand. Not everyone wanted to. That evening, I stood alone on the bridge, watching the sunset paint the river gold. My phone buzzed with a notification, an email from Morrison's law office with the subject line, "One more thing." I opened it, expecting another legal document. Instead, it was a message from Morrison himself. "David, I've been going through your grandfather's papers and found something interesting. It seems he owned more than just Sterling Bridge. I've discovered deeds to 12 other bridges across America, all in communities where he did business back in the day. Each one comes with a trust fund and the same condition. Use it for good, not greed. Looks like your work isn't done yet. Happy hunting. Morrison. P.S. I've included a list." The next one is in a small town in Texas where the HOA has banned children from playing outside. Thought you might be interested. I laughed out loud. Alone on the bridge my grandfather had stolen and I had redeemed. Emma appeared beside me, camera in hand as always. "Mr. Thompson, is it true? 12 more bridges? Are you going to do it all again?" I thought about Monica in prison, learning to teach, Jason helping victims of corruption, Sophia running an honest HOA, Emma herself turning teenage rebellion into social justice journalism. All the lives that had changed because one history teacher refused to be bullied. "You know what, Emma?" I said, grinning. "I think I am. Want to make a documentary?" She was already pulling up flight schedules to Texas on her phone. The Bridge Wars Part 2. Don't mess with Texas teachers. This is going to be epic. And so, 6 months after Monica Crawford blocked me from crossing a bridge, I found myself planning a nationwide campaign against HOA corruption. My grandfather had left me more than bridges and money. He'd left me a mission to prove that power used wisely could heal instead of hurt. The bells of Preston Academy rang in the distance, calling students to class. Tomorrow I'd be back in my classroom, teaching about power and corruption in American history. But now, I had a new chapter to add to the curriculum. Sometimes the best history lessons aren't found in textbooks. Sometimes you have to live them. Sometimes you have to build them. And sometimes you have to cross a bridge to find them. The war for Sterling Bridge was over. The war for community had just begun. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: never underestimate a teacher with nothing to lose and everything to fight for. Class dismissed.
Still here? You're one of us now. Subscribe to BD Stories and binge like your group chat depends on it.